first question is, I want to ask for customer email addresses on my inserts in exchange for a coupon. I know it's against TOS, but has anyone ever gotten in trouble for it? What is your recommendation? This is a funny one. So yes, people have definitely gotten in trouble for that. So if you're going to do something like that, you do not want it to be on any sort of insert that Amazon can take a look at. So if you're going to be sending this to FBA, you certainly don't want to do something like this because it's really, really easy to find. It's super, super easy to see. So just don't do that. Don't do anything where if they go and do a bin check is when they actually physically walk to the bin and then pick it up and look at it. They might open it, they might see it. If they can look at and open it and see that you're violating terms right on the little handout, then you've got a problem, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you're going to do something like that, and generally speaking, I don't recommend it, then you would want to do it behind some sort of closed page on your own website. You would not want to put it in a physical insert. So you'd want to have something there where it said, go here to claim your free stuff. Then you go there, and then behind the website, after you've already entered in your data, then it offers you something. That way you have to have something to offer the little system before it spits out something that would get you in trouble. Okay, don't put anything public in the world that can get you in trouble. Just put it that way. But the real problem is, depending on your category, you can get away with it for a really long time. And then depending on what kind of competition you have, what kind of situation there's with your competition, they could then report you. So the situations where I've seen someone get in trouble is not because Amazon proactively found out. It's because one of their competitors was like, ha, I see you, and then turned them in. And then Amazon did something about it. So Amazon doesn't always do something about those situations, but when they do, you have a problem. So my recommendation is to not do the customer address request on the little insert. That would be bad. And if you really, really are going to go down that route, find a little way to be a little bit more clever and sneaky about it, because that's just a really obvious way to get in trouble. But overall, if you do it at all, a competitor could still buy your product through a friend and go through that whole process and then report you. So doing it at all is risky. Okay. And yes, good morning to everybody. Good to see y'all. Okay, so the second question that came up is, what is the benefit of drop shipping on Amazon rather than FBA? Do you have a recommendation on one over the other? Now, I'm not sure if they're referring to dropship via vendor or using FBA or using merchant fulfilled, which is also sometimes considered dropship. Dropship officially is part of Dropship Central, which is a part of the vendor program. And so it would still say soldbyamazon.com in the little line item below the product. But it would be something that is actually shipped by the vendor. So this is the case when like chocolate is sold, some other types of items will come directly from the vendor, like really big items, they'll often drop ship. And that can actually be really cost effective because Amazon's freight prices are so cheap. So people that I know who have done Dropship Central have been pretty happy with it. There are some exceptions, but they've been pretty happy with it. Now, the challenge with merchant fulfillment is that you just don't get the Prime badge. So often Amazon will give itself the Prime badge just because it's selling it, even if you actually can't ship it in time, which is kind of weird, but it shows up that way. The other thing is, if you're doing drop ship, it's because no one else can ship it via Amazon either. And so all of your competition is in the same boat. If you're the only one who's selling something non-Prime, then you've got a problem. If everyone else is also shipping non-Prime, then you're going to be okay. All right. Question. Do you have recommendation for product partner source for Amazon custom? Kathy, can you go back into that question? Can you explain more? Do you mean to actually start producing Amazon custom items and then listing them on Amazon? Is that what you mean? And then you're trying to find a partner who does like promotional products so that you can offer those? Is that what you mean? Or someone who actually will do the screen printing or will do the embossing or whatever else it is that you wanted to do that's custom? Okay, so a partner that can actually produce it entirely, not someone where you can send a finished good to like a screen printer or something. And while I'm waiting for your answer there, Lee asks, has the seller identity verification process changed recently? They're suppressing listings until verification is done on an old account. Seems strange. Any thoughts? After I documents, but wanted to something new. So Lee, regarding Civ, Not that I know of, but if the account has changed something recently, then it could be triggering the Civ process. So what I mean by that is Civ is triggered by basically financial reporting laws, and they're much more strict in the EU. So I'm assuming you're talking about the US. In the US, there's only a few things that trigger Civ. They're signing up for, I think it's like the Mechanical Turk thing. If you don't know what Mechanical Turk is, super cool. It's a really neat program. Having Amazon payments is one that can trigger Civ. Gosh, what were the other ones? There was something to do with triggering certain denied parties list. There was a couple others that would trigger Civ. So for that, it could be that the account has changed something in the account has changed, or something that you signed up for has changed. Oh, Amazon lending would trigger that. So if anything that has changed in the account, then that could trigger Civ. If you've updated a bank account or something like that, then they might trigger Civ, because they also sometimes will do it based on other factors. And I'm not an expert in Civ, just having worked tangentially with it on the EU. So for US, it just happens to be if you have something change about your account or something that you signed up for, and that particular one requires financial disclosure reporting. It's just, Civ is all about financial disclosure reporting. They need to validate who you are. So it's all about money laundering. It all comes from like Patriot Act era stuff, where people were, basically running businesses that were money laundering to terrorists. So now there's a whole bunch of regulations about that. Some of it's also about tax evasion, but mostly in the US, at least, it was about terrorism. In the UK, it's all about tax evasion. So regardless, Amazon has to report to financial authorities, and they need to know who you are. So yeah, you should definitely just send it in and make sure all your documents match. So just make sure that you actually are, like, if someone was just looking at paper, they would be able to say, yep, this person is who they say they are. So no like mismatched names, any names from like pre-marriage or before marriage, or if you have like 2 LLCs, like just don't have anything weird like that. Otherwise they won't be able to verify you. Okay. And then they usually won't work with you to do that. They'll usually just reject you. So be careful about that before you send any documents in. Okay, so Kathy says, I would like to work with a company that offers quality goods and shipping to the customer. Okay, got it. Yeah, Lee, I like that comment. I'm not smart enough to launder money, right? It seems like a really complicated thing to do. I feel like if they like turned their mind to legitimate pursuits, they'd be rich regardless. But that was always my opinion of fraudsters too. I was like, you guys are so clever. Like if you like tried a real job, you'd be really successful. So Kathy, there's a bunch of good companies in this space. I would say that it depends on what you want to try to do. We use a company called Uprinting, and Uprinting, we use them for our own promotional products, and they're really quick and return things quick. I can send you the information, but I think it's just their website. But it's been really fast and easy to work with them. And then I'll check and see if I've got anyone else on my list. So there may be a list. The certification for promotional products companies. Gosh, what was the name of it? I will go look it up. There's a certification for promotional products companies, and it's just right in the back of my head, and I need to pull it forward. But if you actually look up their website, they have a whole list of all the certified promotional product companies that are out there. And there's a lot of options to work directly with them as well. So it's on their website so that people can see who's certified, but then that can also give you information on who you can work with. And the other one that's actually really cheap that could work is actually Staples. So I know that sounds silly, but Staples has a pretty darn big promotional products arm that's pretty affordable as well. Okay, Gunrunner. Nice, Tandy. I think Gunrunner might actually be easier than Money Launderer. It all seems like a pretty risky business. Okay, so question number 3. I received 1-star feedback and a 1-star product review claiming that the product is not doing what it should. In the feedback, it asks how they can get a refund. Should I ask the customer to create a refund label, or should I refund it without asking for a return to avoid further complaints from the customer? One, if you know who they are, then just refund them without asking. The reason why I say this is because the way that responses to a review come in, they come in, depending on your email service provider, it would come into me through my social tab. And the social tab is what Gmail considers to be all the social junk. And so it's basically just a junk mail folder that's called social. Most people don't ever check it. I check it occasionally because I know that that happens, and so I want to see if anything important like that came through. But I just want to make sure that you know that that's typically what happens to those emails. They don't go into like, unless you've got like, I don't know, AOL or something, then it doesn't come into like a main inbox. Like Gmail will filter it out, and a lot of people have Gmail. I'm not sure how Outlook does it, but definitely like the Lives or the whatever accounts that Microsoft offers, those are the ones that I see often in addition to Gmail. But it will get sorted. So it's much easier just to proactively refund and message them, let them know that you saw the refund, you saw the return request, and just proactively offering a refund if you know who they are. If you don't know who they are, then you're stuck with responding. And when you respond to a 1-star review on Amazon, assume that the person that you're sending it to will not get it. You have to assume that because of where it goes in the notification process. So assume that you need to have more of like a PR attitude. So basically what you need to do is, in a really nice way, demonstrate how it was the customer's fault that they had this experience. So they had this idea of how it didn't work because of XYZ. And then you can explain, well, here's the situation, here's who this is for. And it may not have worked for this customer because of this particular situation, but here's who it's for. And so just see the response as more of a PR opportunity rather than a CS opportunity. So it's not so much customer service at that point if you don't know who they are. It's really trying to get the next customer who lands on the page, who's looking at that 1-star review, to discount it. You want them to think that it's the customer's fault, not your fault. Okay, so that's the most important thing that you can do with a 1-star review if you don't know who they are, is just make sure that the next person who lands on there won't be completely turned off if they are looking at the product and checking out the comments. Okay, and then Kathy followed up with, not just promotional, think playing cards to t-shirts to mugs to knife sets. Yeah, I would definitely go then with the list of accredited companies, because I can think of off the top of my head 2 companies that do knife sets. And I know it's like a crap ton that do t-shirts and mugs. And I'm sure playing cards too, because anything printed is pretty easy to do. So I will take a look at that. Yeah, it's so funny. I can see the director of the company. It's Dee Fenton is her name. And I can see it starts with an A. I just can't remember the group. It'll come to me. Okay, next question is, I'm a high volume brand registered 3-year seller. I received an invite and spent 2 hours on the phone, yikes, with the category manager for migrating to Vendor Central. What's your opinion on migrating from seller to vendor? Okay, my opinion is that I don't think it makes sense for most people. So there's this kind of interesting thing that a lot of people don't know about internal Amazon, which is that most of the companies that you see are not coordinating with each other. They're actually verticals that are competing with each other. So for example, vendor is actually competing with marketplace. So that vendor manager is trying to shave off something that's happening in marketplace and put it into vendor and get their credit for it instead on their P&L. So you kind of have this kind of competing inner interests. So it's funny, I was talking to someone recently and he was like, wait, so that means that when Amazon Basics knocks something off, it's not just the seller who's upset, but some guy in marketplace who's also ticked off that his product that he's responsible for got knocked off by someone else inside Amazon? Like, yes, that exactly. So my kind of feeling about when they try to like take vendors and sellers and put them into vendor is they're trying to make money, right? Question for you is, do you have enough margin to support Amazon? Basically anything less than 30% margin that you're giving to Amazon. So if they sold it for $10, they need to be buying it full cost in for $7. If it's anything less than that, Amazon considers the ASIN crap. And crap means can't realize a profit. So that means that if you don't have enough margin in your product for them to sell at retail for at least 35% margin, they prefer 40% margin, then you just shouldn't work with vendor. Just don't bother. Because you also need to make sure that you have enough space built in for the damage allowance. You have enough space built in for shipping allowances and for marketing allowances. And so when you add all those up, it can be pretty darn hard to maintain that 40% margin. So it's a little bit tricky to do it. Basically, the big vendors can do it because they're working with their suppliers at razor thin margins for the supplier. So the suppliers, especially in China or elsewhere, like factory suppliers, a lot of times they're operating at 2 to 5% margins at best. They're really kind of, right on the line there. And so when they're providing product, they can do it at a really low cost to someone like Mattel because they know they're going to get paid, they know there's a schedule, and so they can work with that. But if you're a smaller vendor, you're not going to be able to get those same kind of volume buys, and so you're not going to have the same kind of margin leverage that you have when you're a big vendor. So I would just be careful unless you have that. So this says high volume brand. If you have that kind of margin, if you can actually buy that kind of at that kind of low price from your vendors, from your suppliers, excuse me, and then take it to Amazon to where you have with all in 40% margin, go for it. There's some pretty cool stuff that they support you with, getting onto mailing lists, getting different kinds of placements, different kinds of deals of the day, gold box deals, etc. There's some cool stuff that you can get as vendors. Now you definitely have to pay for it, but there's some cool stuff that you can do. You just have to make sure you got the margin first. You don't want to make Amazon a losing money proposition. Okay. And yes, Lee, that is a fabulous point. Sorry, I missed that. Lee says, great explanation. I have experienced this, pulled out a vendor. It took me years to get my own listings back under my control. Yes, that's the worst part about vendor. If you go into it without knowing that that's what you have to do, and you need to have that kind of margin to make it profitable for you, now your ASINs are all under Amazon's control. And so you can go back in and call them and say, can you please remove the retail contributions? And some associates have the ability to do that. And so you've got to get one. They're called captive associates. And some of them don't. Actually, there's very few people who can do this. And for those who can't, you're basically stuck just asking Amazon to make changes to your listing every time you need to make one. Horrible. It's so annoying. And because on vendor side, the turnaround time, the typical SLA for responses, if it's an emergency issue, then the SLA is like 7 days or something. And if it's a typical issue, it's like 30 days. And they don't have any phone support. It's all through email. So unless you can actually get a vendor manager on the phone, you're kind of SOL. And imagine how many people are big enough to get a vendor manager on the phone? Not many. So it can be really difficult working with Amazon as a vendor. Most companies build relationships. They build long-term relationships with the companies, and then they might squeeze them, but they have a relationship. It's all about people talking to you. It's all about people interacting with you. Amazon hires math majors. Like literally out of college, they'll hire like stats majors to run these categories because it's all about the numbers. And you want someone who can crunch large amounts of data in Excel. So it's a totally different business model. Just, anyone who does that, just be careful. Yes, and Lisa says I was very unhappy about the lack of control. Exactly. That's the biggest challenge for me too, is if you don't have control. So frustrating. Looks like I missed a question from Kara. If a product is damaged in shipment from Amazon to the customer and the customer labels as defective, can I open a case and send photos of the damaged box or item for reimbursement? Yes, you can. Now, Amazon may or may not choose to give it to you, but you can submit that, and quite often they will give it to you. Just make sure you've got the pictures and demonstrate how it's actually packaged. So make sure you have pictures of how it's packaged, and then put them side by side with the pictures of the damage or whatever is going on. So that the person who's reviewing it needs to have every piece of information in front of them to be able to review it within about 3 minutes. So you kind of have to make sure that they've got all the information in front of them to make a good decision all at once. Okay, next question. I would like to trademark my brand in the EU to enroll for Amazon Brand Registry. My EU seller account is set up as Company Ltd. If I register the trademark under my own name rather than Company Ltd, would this cause issues in enrolling for brand registry? Secondly, is it best to file the trademark application under my personal name or my company? Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. First, if you have a US trademark, you can get brand registry in the EU without filing in the EU. You can get brand registry anywhere in the world on Amazon with any trademark that they recognize. So that means any of the regions that they're in: Australia, United States, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, China, India, and the 5 EU countries or the EU. So if you get any sort of trademark in any of those countries, you can get brand registry anywhere else. Now, you don't have any legal protection there unless you get trademarked. So if you're going to sell there, I still recommend getting the trademark, but it's not the same kind of of requirement where you have to get it first and then apply to Amazon. You can use your trademark from the US to register in Europe. Now that's the first thing. The second thing is who owns the trademark actually doesn't matter at all from an Amazon perspective. All that you have to be able to do is make sure that you have access to the person who filed it. So if you're registering on behalf of another company, you can register and then get the code from them and then submit the code to Amazon. You've got registry. So really all that you need is the ability to get the code. So if you registered under your own name, then you'd be able to get the code because it's under your name and you registered it. Totally fine. Now, in terms of the actual defense of your intellectual property in Europe, if someone were to rip you off and you were going to try to sue them, that's where you need to actually contact a Europe-based lawyer, however you're going to do that. And if you're registering with the EU, you want to make sure you've got a lawyer who's experienced with the European Court of Justice. You want to double check with them which would be the most effective for you to do, because you would have to sue them as yourself if they infringed and you registered the trademark yourself, or you could sue them under your company's name if it was registered that way. So you'd want to check with an actual European lawyer to be able to see if that makes sense. So I would double check there. But from an Amazon perspective, from a brand registry perspective, it doesn't matter. Not a big deal. Speaking of brand registry, for any of you who are not aware, Mexico, I just found this out and I went live yesterday to talk about it because I'm super excited about it. It's like, this is so amazing. For anyone who wants to launch a new brand, because it used to be that people would have multiple niche brands, and now it's been like, I don't want to register with USPTO for anything new. Well, now it's super cool. We can actually facilitate registering in Mexico and it takes between 10 to 16 weeks. That's it, instead of 10 to 15 months. That's super exciting. And it only costs $1,000. And we're super excited to be able to offer that. We have multiple clients who either were part of Brand Registry 1.0 and just got kicked out. Yes, that's starting to happen. People are getting kicked out of Brand Registry 1.0. So you really need to be on this. So we've got multiple clients who are part of that, who are trying to get registered as quickly as possible in Mexico. And so then we can just register in the US. And the other thing that's helpful with is people who couldn't get registered in the US for whatever reason, say their trademark was too generic or whatever, because you're registering in Mexico and it's in English, you're much more likely to be able to get it through. So just a nice little tidbit there. So pretty excited there. Okay, next question. With Amazon cracking down on trademark infringement, I search each and every single word and phrase in my product listing on USPTO to see whether the word phrase is trademarked, and then I remove them if so. My question is, if a word is trademarked, should it not be in your listing at all, even if it is in a different goods and services category on USPTO? For example, the word float is trademarked under the goods and services category of medical device and associated software. But if I'm selling a swimsuit, am I still infringing on trademark if using the word float? Okay, first thing, that's pretty darn detailed, but I understand why, because there's some crazy people out there who will file infringements against you, and Amazon's just crazy enough to accept it sometimes. But as far as this particular example, float being registered under medical device and must be medical device and associated software, no, you don't have to worry about it if you're selling swimwear, because that's the reason why you register a trademark in a specific space, is because you can only defend your trademark in that space. Now, you can argue that it's tangentially related. So say if you were to register dietary supplements, you could say that anything that's done in grocery is considered a trademark violation because it's so close, it's ingestible. So you can make like kind of tangential cases like that. You might not win, but you can try to like go after someone like that. But if it's completely different, it shouldn't be an issue. As far as what we've actually seen people get warned about on Amazon, it's obvious violations. It's the actual brand name in the title, or it's the actual brand name in the bullets or descriptions or something like that. So we very rarely see this kind of, like, it floats around where there's all these like horror stories about terrible things happening, and mistakes happen on Amazon's part. But most of the time we see suspensions happen, it's because there's an actual violation. Like one client had accessory products for particular brands, and he put all the brands in to his listing to show what it was compatible with. No, don't do that. So that's the kind of thing that can get you into trouble. Typically, it's not the whole thing. Now, what I have seen people do is they didn't realize it was a brand name. They didn't realize that it was there's some phrases that if you put them together, like Kleenex. Everyone uses Kleenex, even if it's not Kleenex, but it's a brand name. That's the kind of thing that I've seen people get into a little bit of trouble with, something where they just assume that this name was just a typical name for something, but it was actually trademarked. Tandy asks, you need the trademark passed first though, right? Yes. So it can't be based on the registration. So in Mexico, you actually get your trademark back within 10 to 16 weeks. Tandy also asks, can you FBA list under your own brand name if it isn't brand registered or trademark completed yet? Yes, absolutely. You can make up any brand name you want. You can just type in ABCDEFG brand. I don't think anyone's got that one. Maybe they do by now. But you can literally put anything you want in the brand name field. The problem is, as soon as you do that, then other people can change the listing. They can call Amazon and say, hey, I've got this product. The worst situation that we found was someone who did that by actually creating Shopify websites with those brand names, because sometimes they require a manufacturer proof to be able to make changes. So this guy actually made fake websites to create manufacturer proof and then hijacked other people's listings. So definitely, if you're going to run a brand properly, create a website and own it, because you want to be able to make sure that no one can basically hijack your identity and then tell Amazon, here's what it is. The other thing that we've seen is that people who did not register, they had it first, they listed it on Amazon first, but didn't have it anywhere else. So there's no proof that they listed on Amazon first. And then other companies went and registered it with USPTO when they didn't, because they didn't have the money or whatever. And then the other company booted them off of their own product. So that's actually happened. So be careful there. Protect yourself legally in the country where you're selling. You always want to register USPTO, even though it takes more than a year. You still want to register. You still want to make it happen. But I definitely recommend going the Mexico route if you're concerned about getting brand registry and getting ownership of those listings. As soon as you get brand registry, no one else can edit it out from underneath you. Catherine asks, I got a message from Amazon regarding transparency and wanting to discuss. Have you heard anything about this? Yes, transparency is cool. Not super great, but cool. So transparency makes it to where if you've got a particular label on your product, it can't be received at Amazon unless it's a label that's issued by you. So that can be cool to prevent people from buying things like the store and shipping it in. But the problem is, from what I understand, it doesn't solve the problem of merchant fulfillment. People can still merchant fulfill. Now, if you're the one selling on Amazon FBA, then they're never going to win the buy box, and so there's not much of a point in them doing that. But just so you know, it really is an FBA program. And the only thing that we've seen in terms of what it costs is that the machine to print the labels is pretty specialized, so that can be kind of expensive. But otherwise, there's no hidden costs in it, other than you got to label everything with this transparency sticker. But I've heard some good things about it. New programs, I'm pretty iffy about new programs like that, because they literally just launched it. And it seems like one of those things where they launch it and then next year they're like, oh, that didn't work out so well. I guess we're going to do something else. That's annoying. So it's certainly worth looking into. Oh, and someone asked about Amazon Brand Incubator last week, and I wanted to look into it. It's actually kind of a replacement for Amazon Exclusives. Amazon Exclusives is part of it. And Brand Incubator has very similar program goals, but you don't have to be exclusive. There's a few things that are still limited to just exclusives, but Brand Incubator is a little bit broader. So there's a few different companies that we work with where I actually recommended that they go and apply for it after the session last week. So I was like, fascinating. Amazon's always changing things. I think it just came up, pretty recently, because up until even Q4 last year, I was only seeing an Amazon Exclusives website. So that's pretty exciting. It is an extra 5% for the clients that we've recommended. They have pretty significant margins, and so it works for them to do the extra 5% there. Okay, next question is, I'm having someone on Fiverr design my product package, and I'm wondering if I need to buy a UPC code first and send to the designer to put on the package, or if this is not necessary. Depends. If you're trying to sell to any sort of retailers, you need a UPC code. That's just required. If you are selling on Amazon, not necessary. You need an FNSKU typically. I generally don't recommend using the manufacturer barcode. I'm not a fan of using the manufacturer barcode because if somebody else uses it, it can be commingled. And also, it's hard to manage your lots if you use manufacturer barcode. So some products, it doesn't matter about managing your lots, but other products, I prefer to use FNSKU, because then for 6 months, one product can be shipped in with one FNSKU, then you can change it to a new one and ship it in. So that means that no old stuff is hanging out. If you have like a supplement product or a food product, you can change out your FNSKUs and keep track of it that way. Amazon supposedly tracks your expiration dates. Do not trust them. It's not a solid system. They miss things. So then you might have expired products we got to customers. So always control your inventory yourself, because Amazon certainly won't. Are you still working on an addendum to the advertising course to include ASIN targeting from Kathy? Yes, I wanted to bring this up. We are having a webinar on Friday to talk about the 7 new things that Amazon has added to advertising in the last 8 weeks. They keep adding new stuff. Every time I get done with one thing, they're like, oh, and there's a new thing. So at this point, we have product targeting, category targeting, the portfolio widget, the new placement report, automated targeting, new display ads, and new dynamic bids, replacing Bid Plus. So there's a lot of new stuff. So there's a ton of new stuff that's going on. So I'm just having a whole webinar on Friday, just going through it in detail, just going through all of the things and why you would use certain things, why you wouldn't use others, what it works for, what it doesn't work for. We've basically been testing product and category targeting for the last 2 months. And I feel pretty confident about giving you advice now. It was all over the place at first. That's the biggest problem with new things on Amazon is they're testing it. And so sometimes things aren't quite ready yet when they roll it out. They're allowing the users, us, the guinea pigs, to test it first and then tweak things and fix it. So for the first couple of weeks, it was just all over the place. And I'm like, I don't understand what's happening. I do not feel comfortable advising anyone until I understand what's happening. And so over the last few weeks, then it's all kind of started to settle down. You can kind of see what was actually happening and where it's going. So now I feel comfortable saying, okay, here's what's happening. Here's what you should do. Yeah, so Lee, it's a lot. They're trying to bring it in parity with AMS and AMG, and there's a lot more to come. So I know I used AMS quite frequently last year, and there's a lot of features that are still to come. So I'm excited. I'm especially excited about display ads. Those just showed up this week on some accounts. So yay! Display ads are when anyone who lands on your Amazon page, the ad follows them throughout the internet. So on Facebook, on Google, wherever, they're going to get an ad for your product. So that's pretty darn cool. All right, and the last question that we had for today, please feel free to post in the chat as well. Thank you, guys. Merchant Words and Jungle Scout are giving me completely different keyword volume estimations. Which one should I believe? And my answer to that is neither one. Basically, both Merchant Words and Jungle Scout are kind of famous for overestimating numbers, and it's all a guess, right? So either way, I kind of see both of them as relative estimators. So if Merchant Words says that there's 1 million searches on something, I'm like, oh, that's a really popular keyword. If Merchant Words says there's 5,000 searches on something, I'm like, oh, that's a tiny, tiny keyword, right? So it's a relative thing. And then the same with Jungle Scout. When we were testing Jungle Scout, I was kind of appalled at how up and down it was compared to the reality. The tool that we think is most accurate is actually Scope. That's the one that we prefer. I actually like using Merchant Words a lot for one particular reason, and it's because if I put in women's red pants, Merchant Words will give me every possible combination of keywords that have women's red pants in it. So obviously it would be pants woman red, pants red woman, like all those will be there, but it'll also be plus size, triple XL, like all the ones that they've ever indexed and the relative importance of each. Now, I would not rely on the actual traffic numbers. I would say the relative importance of each is how you should look at it. But that's the thing that's so cool about it, is it's great for advertising. So I actually don't use those kinds of tools for product research. I actually just use good old Amazon and do searches and see what kind of results I get there, and not rely on a third-party tool there, mainly because I don't do product development the way that some of those guys teach. But what I actually use these tools for is advertising. The keyword lists are great. The question from earlier in the call from Tracy. Tracy asked, if I have a 1-star review from back in the summer that I never responded to, would you respond now for future buyers to see? Is it too late? I didn't originally respond because the comment came from a competitor. Definitely respond. I actually had a client go back and respond to the last 2 years of comments just so that they would be there publicly. Now, would an actual customer respond? Probably not. That's probably not going to be a thing. If they do, cool, but just make sure that you have something publicly facing for folks to look at, especially if you had a hijacker. If you had a hijacker, it's even more important because you need to be able to explain that. So there was a company that got ripped off, Johnny Victorio, I think it was, the apple peelers. And I was looking for apple peelers and found them, and there's a whole bunch of 1-star reviews. this thing is aluminum and it's crap. I wanted cast iron. And the customer service from the company actually responded and said, I'm so sorry to hear that, but it looks like you got a knockoff. If you go to other sellers, you can see that the Johnny Victorio products are sold by X seller name. Anyone else may not be selling the original Johnny Victorio product. We're so sorry that you had this issue. Please contact our customer service and we'll get you set up with a real Johnny Victorio product. Like, they were really, really good about it, right? So something like that is really great for PR, because when someone else sees that, when they're reading through, they're gonna be like, oh, that's so cool, right? So it's always good to kind of have that kind of PR focus when you're responding to one-star reviews. If it's just sitting there, then they win, right? There's no counter argument. Tracy also asks, how do you know if you have a display ad? You just go to advertising and campaign manager and create campaign. Some accounts will have sponsored products, sponsored brands, and then some accounts will have display ads. And then other accounts don't have it yet. It's still in beta. Okay, all right. Any other questions? This one took a little bit longer. There were a lot of questions this morning. That's awesome. I love the involvement. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, the posting for the advertising webinar will go out later today, and it is on Friday, and there will be replays available in case you can't make it. But I'm super excited to share all this with you guys because, wow, it's a lot. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you next Wednesday.